The sound of thunder rolled across the Arizona desert like drums of war, though no rain had fallen in Tombstone for 3 weeks straight. And when the knocking came at Zachary Norwood's door that October evening in 1882, he almost mistook it for another trick of the wind that howled through the gaps in his ranch house walls. He set down the whiskey he had been nursing, his third glass that night, and walked toward the front door with heavy boots that echoed through the empty rooms of a home built for a family he never had. The knocking came again, more desperate this time, accompanied by a voice that cut through the desert wind like a knife through butter. "Please, is anyone there? I need help." Zachary pulled open the door and found himself staring at a young woman drenched from head to toe, despite the lack of rain. Her clothes soaked through with what he quickly realized was water from the creek she must have tried to cross. Her dark hair hung in wet ropes around her pale face, and her green eyes reflected the lamplight from inside his house like emeralds catching fire. She could not have been more than 22 or 23 years old, and she was shivering so violently her teeth chattered between words. "Please, sir, my horse threw me near the creek and ran off. I have been walking for hours. I just need shelter for one night, just until morning. I can pay you." Zachary stood there for a moment, caught between the instinct to help and the years of solitude that had taught him to keep people at a distance. He was 27 years old and had lived alone on this ranch for the past 5 years, ever since his parents died of fever and left him everything they had built. He had grown accustomed to silence, to emptiness, to the kind of loneliness that became its own companion. "Come in," he finally said, stepping aside. "You will freeze to death out there once the temperature drops." She stumbled through the doorway, leaving muddy footprints on the wooden floor he had swept just that morning. He closed the door behind her and watched as she stood there trembling, her arms wrapped around herself, water dripping from her clothes onto the floor. "My name is Amelia Morrison," she said through chattering teeth. "I was traveling from Tucson to meet my uncle in Bisbee, but I got lost somewhere along the way. The storm came up so fast, and when the lightning struck near my horse, she panicked." "Zachary Norwood," he replied, moving toward the fireplace to stoke the flames. "You are about 15 miles southwest of Tombstone. Bisbee is another 30 miles beyond that." He grabbed a blanket from the back of his worn leather chair and handed it to her. "You need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch pneumonia. I will find you something dry to wear." He disappeared into his bedroom and returned with one of his old cotton shirts and a pair of trousers that would be too large for her but would have to do. "There is a privacy screen in the corner. Change behind that and hang your wet things by the fire." Amelia nodded gratefully and moved behind the screen with shaking hands. Zachary busied himself in the small kitchen area, heating water for coffee and trying not to think about the fact that there was a woman in his house for the first time since his mother died. He heard the rustle of wet fabric being removed, the soft sound of her breathing as she struggled with buttons and laces, and he focused intently on the coffee pot to keep his mind from wandering. When she emerged from behind the screen, she looked different. Smaller somehow, more vulnerable in his oversized clothes with the sleeves rolled up and the trousers cinched tight with a piece of rope she had found. Her wet hair was wrapped in a towel, and some color had returned to her cheeks. "Thank you," she said quietly, settling into the chair by the fire. "I truly did not know what I was going to do. I thought I might have to sleep under the stars and hope the coyotes did not find me." Zachary handed her a cup of hot coffee and watched as she wrapped both hands around it, savoring the warmth. "It is not safe for a woman to travel alone out here." "Where is your family? Why would they let you make such a journey by yourself? Amelia's expression darkened, and she stared into the coffee cup as if it held answers to questions she had not asked. My parents died 2 years ago. Cholera outbreak in Tucson. My uncle wrote to me saying he had work for me at his general store in Bisbee, that I could live with him and his wife. I sold everything I had left to buy that horse and supplies for the journey. She laughed bitterly. Now I have nothing but wet clothes and the charity of a stranger. You are welcome to stay until morning, Zachary said, sitting down in the chair opposite her. I will ride out at first light and see if I can find your horse. If she did not run too far, I should be able to track her. I cannot ask you to do that. You are not asking, I am offering. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle and the wind howl outside. Zachary found himself studying her face in the firelight, noticing the way her eyes reflected both sadness and determination, the set of her jaw that suggested she was stronger than she looked. He had grown so accustomed to his own company that he had forgotten what it felt like to share space with another person, to hear someone else breathing in the same room. How long have you lived here alone? Amelia asked, breaking the silence. 5 years. That is a long time to be by yourself. I prefer it that way, he said, though even as the words left his mouth, they felt less true than they once had. Less complicated. Amelia nodded as if she understood, though something in her expression suggested she did not entirely believe him. Do you have any ranch hands, cattle? I have about 200 head of cattle, some horses. I hire men from town when I need help with the roundup or branding, but otherwise I manage on my own. The land has a good water source, and the grass grows well enough to support the herd. It sounds like a lonely life. It is an honest one. She did not respond to that, just continued to sip her coffee and stare into the fire. After a while, Zachary showed her to his parents' old bedroom, a space he had kept closed off for the past 5 years but had occasionally aired out and dusted. The bed was made with clean linens and he had placed an oil lamp on the bedside table. I will take the couch, he said. If you need anything during the night, just call out. Thank you, Zachary. I do not know how I can ever repay your kindness. There is nothing to repay. Sleep well, Amelia. He closed the door and returned to the main room, stretching out on the couch that was too short for his 6-foot frame. He lay there in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person in his house, the creak of bed springs as she settled in, the soft sigh she made as sleep finally claimed her. He found himself wide awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering about this woman who had appeared at his door like something out of a dream or a cautionary tale. When morning came, Zachary woke before dawn as he always did and found Amelia already up, her hair dried and braided, his clothes still hanging loose on her frame. She had started a fire and was attempting to make breakfast with the limited supplies she found in his kitchen. You did not have to do that, he said, watching her crack eggs into a pan. It is the least I can do after your hospitality. Besides, I could not sleep anymore. I kept thinking about my horse, about whether she is hurt somewhere or if some predator found her. I will head out as soon as we eat. The sun will be up soon, and tracking will be easier in the daylight. They ate breakfast together in comfortable silence, and Zachary found himself noticing small things about her. The way she ate slowly, savoring each bite as if she had not eaten well in some time. The way she glanced around his house, taking in details with an observant eye. The way she thanked him for the food with genuine warmth in her voice. After breakfast, Zachary saddled his best horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper, and rode out toward the creek where Amelia said she had lost her mare. The sun was just beginning to paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the desert came alive with the sounds of morning birds and the distant howl of coyotes returning to their dens after a night of hunting. He found tracks easily enough near the creek bank, the deep impressions of a horse's hooves in the mud where Amelia's mare had panicked. He followed them east, tracking the frightened animal's flight across the scrubland. It took him nearly 3 hours, but he eventually found the mare grazing in a small canyon about 5 miles from his ranch, her reins tangled in some brush, but otherwise unharmed. He approached her slowly, speaking in low, soothing tones until he could grab her reins and free her from the tangle. Her saddlebags were still intact, and he found Amelia's belongings inside, including a small leather pouch with what little money she had and a bundle of letters tied with string. By the time he returned to the ranch, leading the mare behind Copper, it was past noon. Amelia came running out of the house when she heard the horses, her face breaking into a smile that transformed her entire appearance. "You found her. Oh, thank God you found her." She rushed to the mare and threw her arms around the horse's neck, pressing her face against the animal's shoulder. Zachary dismounted and watched her reunion with her horse, something warm and unfamiliar stirring in his chest. "Her name is Daisy," Amelia said, stroking the mare's face. "She was my mother's horse. She is all I have left of my family." "She seems sound," Zachary said. "No injuries that I could see, just spooked badly." Amelia turned to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "How can I ever thank you? You have done so much for me, a complete stranger." "You should stay another night," Zachary heard himself say before he could think better of it. "Let the horse rest, make sure she is truly uninjured. The journey to Bisbee is long and you should not rush it." Amelia looked at him for a long moment, as if searching for something in his face. "Are you sure? I do not want to impose on your hospitality any more than I already have." "I am sure." That night, they sat together by the fire again, and Amelia told him more about her life in Tucson, about her parents who had run a small bakery, about the dreams she had harbored of maybe opening her own shop someday. Zachary found himself talking more than he had in years, telling her about his parents, about the ranch, about the isolation he had convinced himself he preferred. "I do not think you really prefer it," Amelia said softly. "I think maybe you are just afraid of losing anyone else." Her words struck something deep inside him, a truth he had buried beneath years of solitude and routine. He did not respond, but he did not deny it either. The next morning, when it came time for Amelia to leave, Zachary found himself inventing reasons for her to stay. The horse might need another day of rest. The weather looked uncertain. The road to Bisbee was dangerous, and maybe she should wait for a traveling party or a stage coach. "Zachary," Amelia said gently, standing by Daisy with her hand on the saddle, "what are you really trying to say?" He looked at her, this woman who had knocked on his door just 2 nights ago, and realized that something fundamental had shifted inside him. The house that had felt comfortable in its emptiness now seemed hollow. The silence he had cherished now felt oppressive. The thought of her leaving created an ache in his chest he could not name. "Stay," he said simply. "Not just another night, stay." "I cannot. My uncle is expecting me. He has already arranged for my employment, my room." "What if you stayed here instead? I could use help on the ranch. I could pay you wages, give you your own room. It is not Bisbee, but Tombstone is close enough for supplies and company when you need it." Amelia's eyes widened. "You are offering me a job?" "Yes, and a home if you want it." She was quiet for a long time, her hand still resting on the saddle, her gaze moving from him to the house to the land stretching out in all directions. Finally, she spoke. "I will need to write to my uncle, explain the situation. It would not be right to simply not appear when he is expecting me." "Of course. And I would want my own room, proper sleeping arrangements. I will not compromise my reputation, even out here where there is no one to see or judge. You already have your own room. That will not change." "Then yes," she said, a smile spreading across her face. "Yes, I will stay." The relief that washed over Zachary was so intense it nearly buckled his knees. He helped her unsaddle Daisy and put the mare in the corral with his other horses, and together they walked back to the house that no longer felt quite so empty. The days that followed established a new rhythm to life on the ranch. Amelia proved to be a hard worker, rising early to help with morning chores, learning quickly how to care for the chickens Zachary kept, how to milk the cow, how to mend fences and haul water. She took over the cooking, transforming his sparse meals into something that actually tasted good. And she brought life to the house with small touches: wildflowers in a jar on the table, curtains she sewed from fabric she bought in Tombstone, the sound of her humming while she worked. Zachary found himself looking forward to each day in a way he had not in years. He taught Amelia how to ride better, how to handle a rifle for protection against predators, how to read the weather in the movement of clouds and the behavior of animals. She learned quickly, her intelligence and determination evident in everything she did. They talked endlessly, sharing stories and dreams and fears they had never spoken aloud to anyone else. Zachary learned that Amelia had wanted to be a teacher before her parents died, that she loved reading, and had brought her small collection of books with her from Tucson. Amelia learned that Zachary had wanted to see the ocean, that he played the harmonica his father had given him, that he was far more tender-hearted than his gruff exterior suggested. The letter she wrote to her uncle received a response 3 weeks later. Her uncle expressed disappointment but understanding, and he wished her well in her new position. There was a hint of concern about propriety in his words, but Amelia wrote back assuring him that her employer was a gentleman and her situation was respectable. As October turned to November and the desert nights grew colder, something deeper began to develop between them. It started with small things: the way Zachary's hand would linger on hers when he helped her down from a horse, the way Amelia would touch his shoulder when she brought him coffee while he worked on the books, the way they would catch each other staring and quickly look away, both feeling something neither was quite ready to name. One evening in late November, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors when Amelia spoke what had been building between them for weeks. "I am falling in love with you," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "I know I should not say it. I know it is too soon and too bold and probably improper, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel it." Zachary's heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. He turned to look at her, this woman who had walked into his life on a storm-filled night and changed everything. "I fell in love with you the second night you were here," he admitted. "When you said I was afraid of losing anyone else, you saw through me in a way no one ever has. I did not know how to tell you. I did not know if you could ever feel the same way about a lonely rancher who does not have much to offer." Amelia turned to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You offer everything that matters: kindness, safety, understanding, a home. You gave me shelter for one night, but you have given me every night since, and I want every night after that for the rest of my life." Zachary reached out and cupped her face in his rough, work-worn hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "Amelia Morrison, I do not have a ring right now, and this is probably not how it is supposed to be done, but will you marry me? Will you make this house a home and this lonely rancher the happiest man in Arizona?" "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, pouring 5 years of loneliness and weeks of growing love into that single moment. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands gripping his shirt as if she was afraid he might disappear if she let go. They sat there on the porch until the stars came out, holding each other and talking about the future they would build together. They would be married in Tombstone by the circuit judge who came through once a month. They would expand the ranch, maybe build a bigger house someday. They would fill the empty rooms with the sound of children's laughter and create the family both of them had lost. The next morning, Zachary rode into Tombstone and bought a simple gold band from the jeweler, spending more money than he should have, but not caring because Amelia deserved something beautiful. He also stopped by the general store and bought fabric for a wedding dress, and he arranged with the judge for a ceremony in 3 weeks' time, right before Christmas. When he returned home, he found Amelia had cleaned the entire house from top to bottom and was in the kitchen making bread, flour dusted across her nose and cheeks. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, kissing her neck and making her laugh. "I bought you something," he said, pulling out the ring. She turned in his arms, her eyes widening when she saw the gold band. "Zachary, it is beautiful. Not as beautiful as you." He slipped it onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made just for her. The weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Amelia sewed her wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of cream-colored fabric with lace at the collar and cuffs. Zachary cleaned up the ranch, making repairs he had been putting off, painting the fence, fixing the sagging porch step. They invited the few neighbors they had, ranchers from surrounding properties and people from town they had gotten to know through their trips for supplies. On a cold December morning in 1882, Zachary Norwood and Amelia Morrison were married in the small church in Tombstone before a gathering of about 30 people. Amelia wore her handmade dress and wildflowers in her hair, and Zachary wore his best suit that he had not worn since his father's funeral. The judge performed a simple ceremony, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed his bride with such joy and tenderness that several of the women in attendance dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. They held a small reception at the ranch, with food and drink and music provided by some local musicians. Neighbors brought gifts, practical things like quilts and dishes and tools, and they danced under the stars until late into the night. When everyone finally left and they were alone, Zachary carried Amelia over the threshold of their home, both of them laughing and dizzy with happiness. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, a joining not just of bodies but of souls that had found each other against all odds. They made love slowly, learning each other, discovering the ways they fit together. Afterward, they lay tangled in each other's arms, talking softly until sleep claimed them. Life as husband and wife settled into a beautiful pattern over the following months. They worked side by side during the day, building up the ranch and making plans for the future. At night, they would sit by the fire or on the porch, talking and dreaming and simply enjoying each other's company. They made love often, finding joy and passion in each other that neither had known before. In the spring of 1883, Amelia discovered she was pregnant. She told Zachary one evening over dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He stared at her for a long moment, as if he could not quite process the information, and then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He swept her into his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing with pure joy. "We are going to be parents," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Amelia asked, though she could clearly see that he was. "Happy does not even begin to describe it. You have given me everything, Amelia. Everything I did not even know I needed." He was protective of her throughout the pregnancy, often too protective. He tried to forbid her from doing any heavy work, insisting she rest and let him handle everything. "Amelia," stubborn and independent, refused to be treated like an invalid. They had their first real argument about it, voices raised in the kitchen over whether or not she should be lifting water buckets. "I am pregnant, not dying," she snapped. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time while still doing their daily work. I do not care about other women. I care about you and our baby. What if something happens? What if you hurt yourself or the baby? Nothing is going to happen. I am strong and healthy, and I know my limits." They stood there glaring at each other for a moment before Zachary's expression softened. "I am sorry. You are right. I just worry. I cannot lose you, Amelia. I would not survive it." She went to him and took his hands in hers. "You are not going to lose me. We are going to have this baby and I am going to be fine, but you have to trust me to know what I can and cannot do." "I trust you," he said, pulling her into his arms. "I am sorry for being overbearing. You are forgiven. Just remember that I married a rancher, not a tyrant." He laughed and kissed her forehead. "Noted." As her pregnancy progressed through the hot Arizona summer, Zachary did his best to balance his protective instincts with respecting her independence. He hired a ranch hand, a young man named Tom who had recently come west looking for work, which helped lighten the workload for both of them. Amelia spent her time preparing for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and blankets, transforming one of the smaller rooms into a nursery. They made a trip to Tucson in August, so Amelia could see the doctor there, a journey that took 2 days by wagon. The doctor examined her and pronounced both mother and baby healthy, predicting a birth sometime in early October. On the journey home, they talked about names, arguing playfully about whether the baby would be a boy or a girl. "I think it is a boy," Zachary said. "I can feel it." "I think it is a girl," Amelia countered. "Mother's intuition." "What should we name him?" Amelia corrected with a smile. "And I like the name Sarah after my mother. And if it is a boy, we will name him James after my father." In the end, they were both wrong and both right. In early October of 1883, after a long and difficult labor attended by the midwife from Tombstone, Amelia gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Zachary paced outside the bedroom for hours, listening to his wife's cries of pain and feeling utterly helpless. When the midwife finally emerged and told him he had a son and a daughter, he nearly collapsed with relief and joy. He rushed into the bedroom and found Amelia propped up against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding 2 tiny bundles wrapped in the blankets she had made. Tears streamed down his face as he looked at his wife and children, his family, the thing he had given up hoping for until Amelia knocked on his door that stormy night. "James and Sarah," Amelia said softly, "just as we planned." Zachary sat on the edge of the bed and carefully took his son in his arms, marveling at the tiny perfect features, the small hands that gripped his finger with surprising strength. "They are perfect. You are perfect. I love you so much, Amelia." "I love you too. We did it, Zachary. We made a family." The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Twins meant double the work, double the sleepless nights, double the crying and feeding and diaper changing. But it also meant double the joy, double the love, double the laughter. Zachary proved to be a devoted father, taking turns with nighttime feedings, changing diapers without complaint, singing lullabies in his rough voice that somehow always soothed the babies when they fussed. Tom, the ranch hand, proved invaluable during this time, taking over many of the daily operations of the ranch so Zachary could help with the babies. The young man was good with the cattle and horses, reliable and hardworking, and he became almost like part of the family, often joining them for meals and playing with the twins as they grew. As James and Sarah grew from infants into toddlers, the ranch prospered. Zachary expanded the herd, built a bigger barn, and even added 2 rooms onto the house to accommodate their growing family. Amelia started a small garden, growing vegetables and herbs, and she began teaching the twins their letters and numbers as soon as they were old enough to understand. Life was not without its challenges. There were harsh winters when they worried about losing cattle to the cold. There were dry summers when water became scarce, and they had to drive the herd to distant watering holes. There were illnesses that struck the children, terrifying nights when they sat vigil by small bedsides, praying for fevers to break. But through it all, they had each other, and that made everything bearable. On their 5th wedding anniversary in December of 1887, Zachary and Amelia sat on their porch watching James and Sarah play in the yard with their dog, a mutt they had adopted as a puppy. The twins were 4 years old now, full of energy and curiosity, Sarah with her mother's green eyes and James with his father's dark hair. "You remember the night I knocked on your door?" Amelia asked, leaning against Zachary's shoulder. "Every detail," he replied, wrapping his arm around her. "You were soaked through, shivering, desperate. I almost did not open the door." "What made you?" "Honestly, I do not know. Something in your voice maybe, or maybe it was fate. I had spent 5 years convincing myself I was fine alone, that I did not need anyone. And then you appeared and shattered that illusion completely. I only asked for one night. And I gave you every night after that. Best decision I ever made." Amelia tilted her face up to kiss him, a gesture that still sent warmth flooding through him even after 5 years of marriage. "I was so lost that night. I had no idea where I was going or what I was going to do. And then you opened that door and gave me not just shelter but a home, a family, a life beyond anything I had imagined." "We gave each other those things," Zachary corrected. "You saved me as much as I saved you." They watched the twins play until the sun began to set, painting the sky in those brilliant colors they both loved. Sarah ran over to the porch, her face flushed with excitement. "Mama, Papa, look what we found." She held up a smooth stone she had discovered, shaped like a heart. "It is beautiful, sweetheart," Amelia said, taking the stone and examining it. "What a lucky find." James came running up behind his sister. "I found one too, but mine is shaped like a star." Zachary scooped up both children, one in each arm, making them squeal with laughter. "How about we go inside and Mama will make us some dinner and then Papa will tell you a story before bed?" "The story about how you and Mama met," Sarah demanded. It was their favorite tale, one they begged to hear over and over. "Again?" Zachary asked with mock exasperation. "But I have told you that story 100 times. Tell it again," both children chimed together. That night, after dinner was eaten and dishes were washed, after the twins were bathed and dressed in their nightclothes, Zachary sat on the edge of their bed and told them once more about the stormy night when their mother knocked on his door. He told them about finding her horse, about asking her to stay, about falling in love. The children listened with rapt attention, even though they knew every word by heart. When the story was finished and the twins were tucked into bed, Zachary and Amelia retreated to their own room. They made love slowly and tenderly, still finding new ways to pleasure each other even after 5 years together. Afterward, they lay tangled in each other's arms, talking softly about their day, their plans for the future, the small and large joys of their life together. "I want more children," Amelia said suddenly. "Is that crazy? The twins are already a handful." "It is not crazy," Zachary replied, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I would love more children, as many as you want to give me. 3 more, she said decisively. 5 total. A nice big family to fill this house with noise and chaos. 3 more it is," he agreed, kissing her temple. "Though you know we cannot control how many we get. We might end up with another set of twins. Do not even joke about that, Amelia laughed. I love James and Sarah more than life itself, but two at once nearly killed me. But you would survive it if it happened again. We would survive it together. 9 months later, in September of 1888, Amelia gave birth to their third child, a single baby this time, another boy they named Daniel. He was a calm baby, easier than the twins had been, and he completed their family in a way that felt exactly right. The twins adored their little brother, fighting over who got to help feed him or rock him to sleep. The years continued to pass in that way that time does when life is full and happy. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Zachary and Amelia's love deepened into something solid and unshakable. They had their arguments, as all couples do, but they always worked through them with honesty and respect. They had their challenges, years when money was tight or illness struck, or the weather refused to cooperate, but they faced everything together. In 1890, Amelia gave birth to their fourth child, a girl they named Margaret after Zachary's mother. And in 1892, their fifth and final child arrived, a boy they named Thomas after the ranch hand who had become such a trusted friend over the years. The house that had once echoed with emptiness now rang with the sounds of children laughing, crying, playing, learning. The rooms that had stood unused were filled with beds and toys and the beautiful chaos of family life. The silence Zachary had once cherished was replaced by a symphony of voices he would not trade for anything in the world. As the children grew older, they each developed their own personalities and interests. James, the firstborn, was serious and thoughtful, interested in the business side of ranching. Sarah was adventurous and bold, always climbing trees and racing horses despite her mother's worries. Daniel was gentle and artistic, always drawing pictures or making up stories. Margaret was practical and organized, helping her mother run the household with impressive efficiency even as a young girl. And Thomas, the baby, was charming and mischievous, able to talk his way out of trouble with a smile. Zachary taught all of his children to ride, to rope, to understand the land and the animals. Amelia taught them to read and write, to do arithmetic, to appreciate books and learning. Together they taught them about kindness, hard work, honesty, and love. Tom, the ranch hand who had started working for them all those years ago, eventually married a woman from Tombstone and built his own small house on the far edge of the Norwood property. He and his wife had children of their own, and the two families grew close, their children playing together and the adults sharing meals and celebrations. On a warm evening in May of 1899, Zachary and Amelia celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary. The children, now ranging in age from 16 to 7, had prepared a surprise celebration with Tom's help. They decorated the house with wildflowers and ribbons, and they prepared a feast of all their parents' favorite foods. After dinner, as the sun set and the desert air began to cool, the family gathered on the expanded porch that now wrapped around two sides of the house. The children took turns sharing their favorite memories of growing up on the ranch, and there was much laughter and a few tears as stories were told and retold. Finally, Sarah, now a beautiful young woman of 16, stood up and cleared her throat. "Mama, Papa, James and I have been talking, and we wanted you to know that we have decided to stay on the ranch. We are not going to leave like so many young people do, looking for excitement in the cities. This is our home, and we want to help you build it into something even greater." Zachary felt his throat tighten with emotion. He had worried that his children would grow up and leave, seeking opportunities beyond the ranch, beyond Arizona. The thought of this place going back to being quiet and empty had haunted him more than he cared to admit. "Are you sure?" he asked. "You are both still so young. There is so much world out there to see." "We are sure," James said firmly. "This land is in our blood. We belong here." Amelia was crying openly now, and Zachary pulled her close as their children gathered around them, a tangle of arms and love and family. The younger children joined in, declaring that they too would stay forever, though Zachary and Amelia both knew that might change as they grew older. But for now, in this moment, they had everything they had ever dreamed of and more. Late that night, after the children were all in bed and the house was finally quiet, Zachary and Amelia walked out to the small rise behind the house where they could see the entire ranch spread out before them in the moonlight. They held hands and looked out at the land they had built their life on, the home they had created together. "Do you ever think about that night?" Amelia asked. "The night I knocked on your door all the time," Zachary replied. "I think about how different my life would be if I had not answered. I would still be alone in that empty house, drinking whiskey and convincing myself I did not need anyone. I think about what would have happened if you had turned me away, if you had been the kind of man who kept his doors locked and his heart closed. I might have died out there in the desert, or I might have made it to Bisbee and lived a completely different life. But I did not turn you away, and you did not die, and we created this beautiful life together." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "You knocked begging shelter for one night, and I gave you every night after that. It was the easiest decision and the best decision I ever made. I love you, Zachary Norwood. I have loved you since the beginning, and I will love you until the end. I love you too, Amelia." More than words can say. They kissed under the stars, the same stars that had witnessed their first shy kisses 17 years ago, the same stars that had watched their children be born and their family grow. The desert wind blew gentle and warm around them, carrying the sounds of night birds and distant coyotes, the eternal music of the land they called home. The years continued their steady march forward. James grew into a fine young man and took over more of the ranch operations, proving to have a natural head for business and ranching both. Sarah eventually married a neighboring rancher's son, a good man named William who treated her with love and respect. They built a house on the Norwood property and started their own family, giving Zachary and Amelia their first grandchildren. Daniel pursued his artistic talents, selling his paintings in Tombstone and even sending some to galleries in Tucson. He never married, content with his art and his family. Margaret became a teacher, opening a small school on the ranch for the children of the area, including her own nieces and nephews from Sarah's growing family. And Thomas, true to his charming nature, became a successful horse trader, traveling throughout Arizona and beyond, but always returning home. As Zachary and Amelia grew older, their hair turning gray and their faces lining with the years, their love only deepened. They settled into the comfortable rhythms of a long marriage, finishing each other's sentences, communicating with just a look, knowing each other's moods and needs without words. On their 30th anniversary in 1912, their children and grandchildren threw them an enormous celebration. People came from all over the territory, neighbors and friends and business associates, to honor the couple who had built not just a successful ranch, but a legacy of love and family. There was music and dancing and enough food to feed an army. At one point in the evening, Zachary pulled Amelia away from the party and led her to the spot behind the house where they had stood so many times over the years. The sun was setting, painting the sky in those brilliant colors they both still loved, and the land stretched out before them, dotted with cattle and horses and the buildings they had added over the decades. 30 years, Zachary marveled. How did we get so lucky? It was not luck, Amelia said. It was choice. You chose to open your door that night. I chose to stay. We chose each other every day since then, through good times and hard times. Best choice I ever made. Me too. They stood there holding each other as the sun sank below the horizon, and their party continued without them. They could hear music and laughter floating on the evening air, the sounds of their children and grandchildren celebrating their love. It was perfect. As they grew even older, into their 60s and then 70s, Zachary and Amelia slowed down but never stopped. They spent their days sitting on the porch, watching their grandchildren play, telling stories of the old days to anyone who would listen. The story of how they met never got old, and they told it to each new grandchild as soon as they were old enough to understand. Their children ran the ranch now, with James taking the lead but always consulting his parents on major decisions. The Norwood Ranch had become one of the most successful in the territory, known for quality cattle and honest dealing. But more than that, it was known as a place of love and family, where multiple generations lived and worked together in harmony. On a quiet morning in April of 1925, Zachary woke early as he always did, though now it took him longer to rise from bed, his joints stiff and aching. He looked over at Amelia still sleeping beside him, her gray hair spread across the pillow, her face peaceful in repose. She was 76 years old now, and he was 80, and they had been married for 42 years. He thought about getting up to make coffee, but instead he lay there watching her sleep, counting his blessings. 50 years ago he had been alone in this house, convinced he would die alone, that he did not need or want anyone in his life. And then Amelia had knocked on his door and everything changed. She stirred and opened her eyes, smiling when she saw him watching her. "Good morning, my love." "Good morning. How are you feeling, old?" she laughed. "But happy. So very happy." They rose slowly and dressed, helping each other with buttons and laces that their old fingers struggled with. They made their way to the kitchen where Margaret, who now lived in the main house to care for them, already had coffee brewing and breakfast started. "Good morning, Mama, Papa," she said, kissing each of their cheeks. "How did you sleep?" "Like logs," Zachary replied, settling into his chair at the table. They ate breakfast surrounded by the morning sounds of the ranch waking up, children's voices calling to each other, horses whinnying, the distant lowing of cattle. It was the symphony of their life, and Zachary never tired of hearing it. After breakfast, they moved to the porch as they did every morning, settling into the comfortable rocking chairs that had been built specially to ease their aging bodies. They sat there holding hands, rocking gently, watching the ranch come alive with activity. "You have any regrets?" Amelia asked suddenly. Zachary considered the question carefully. "Not a single one. You, only that we did not have more time." "But I suppose everyone feels that way when they reach our age. There is never enough time for all the love we have to give." "We will have more time," Zachary said, squeezing her hand. "In whatever comes after this, we will find each other again. I truly believe that." "Promise me something," Amelia said, her voice growing serious. "Anything. Promise me that if I go first, you will not return to that lonely man you were before. Promise me you will let our children and grandchildren love you and care for you. Promise me you will not shut down." "I promise," Zachary said, his voice thick with emotion. "But only if you promise me the same thing. If I go first, you have to keep living, keep loving. Promise me." "I promise." They sat there for a long time, just holding hands and rocking, storing up these moments against the future they both knew was coming. They had lived a good life, a long life, and they were ready for whatever came next. But they were in no hurry, content to sit here together watching the world they had built continue without them. The years they had left passed gently. There were more grandchildren, and then great-grandchildren, more celebrations and gatherings, more stories told and memories made. Zachary and Amelia remained fixtures on that porch, the patriarch and matriarch of a family that now numbered in the dozens, all of them owing their existence to a stormy night in 1882, when a desperate young woman knocked on a lonely rancher's door. In the spring of 1929, Amelia fell ill. It started as a simple cold but developed into pneumonia, and despite the best efforts of doctors from as far away as Tucson, she grew weaker. Zachary rarely left her bedside, holding her hand, telling her stories, reminding her of all the wonderful years they had shared. "I am not afraid," she told him one evening as the sun set outside their window. "I have had the most beautiful life because of you." "Because of us," he corrected, tears streaming down his weathered face. "We did it together. Will you tell me one more time about the night we met?" So Zachary told her the story one final time, holding her hand and watching her face as he spoke. He told her about hearing the knock on the door, about finding her shivering and desperate, about deciding to let her stay. He told her about falling in love, about asking her to marry him, about building this life together. "You knocked begging shelter for one night," he finished, his voice breaking, "and I gave you every night after that. It was the greatest privilege of my life." "And it was the greatest gift of mine," Amelia whispered. "I love you, Zachary, always. I love you too, always and forever." Amelia closed her eyes and took her last breath surrounded by her husband and children, peaceful and ready. She was 79 years old, and she had lived every single day of the last 47 years wrapped in love. Zachary kept his promise to her. He did not shut down or return to the lonely man he had been before. He let his children care for him. He played with his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. He continued to tell the story of how he and Amelia met to anyone who would listen. But a light had gone out in his eyes, and everyone who knew him could see that part of him had died with his wife. He lived for 2 more years, watching the ranch continue to prosper under his children's management, watching new generations be born. He took comfort in knowing that the legacy he and Amelia had built would continue long after he was gone. On an October evening in 1931, 49 years almost to the day after Amelia had knocked on his door, Zachary died peacefully in his sleep. He was 86 years old. His children found him the next morning, a slight smile on his face, as if he had seen something wonderful in his dreams. They buried him next to Amelia on the rise behind the house where they had stood so many times over the years, looking out at the land they loved. The entire community came to pay their respects, and the celebration of his life lasted long into the night, full of stories and laughter and tears. The Norwood Ranch continued to thrive for generations after that, passed down from parent to child, growing and evolving but never losing the foundation of love and family that Zachary and Amelia had established. The house was added onto and modernized, but that original structure remained at its heart, a testament to the life built within its walls. The story of how Zachary and Amelia met became legendary in the family, told and retold at every gathering, to every new generation. The details might vary slightly in the telling, but the essential truth remained the same. A desperate woman knocked on a lonely man's door asking for shelter for one night, and he gave her every night after that. And together they built a love that lasted a lifetime and a legacy that endured forever. Their great-great-grandchildren still lived on the land in the late 20th century, still worked the cattle, still watched the Arizona sunsets paint the sky in brilliant colors. The porch where Zachary and Amelia spent so many hours was preserved as it had been, with the rocking chairs they sat in, a plaque telling their story for visitors to read. But more than the physical place, Zachary and Amelia's true legacy lived on in the hearts of everyone who descended from them, in the values of hard work and kindness they had instilled, in the proof that love could transform lives, and that one act of compassion on a stormy night could ripple forward through time, creating waves of love and family that lasted for generations. The house that had once stood empty and lonely, home to a man who thought he preferred solitude, was now and forever after a symbol of hope and love, and the beautiful things that can happen when we open our doors and our hearts to the strangers who knock asking for help. Zachary opened his door to Amelia that night and gave her shelter, but she gave him something far greater. She gave him a home, a family, a purpose, and a love that transcended time and death itself. And somewhere, in whatever realm exists beyond this one, Zachary and Amelia were together again, young and whole, sitting on a porch watching a sunset, holding hands and telling each other the story of how they met, laughing at how lucky they got, how perfect it all turned out in the end. Because she knocked begging shelter for one night, and he gave her every night after that, and that made all the difference.